Okay, but we understand that, I mean, that the conference passed different recommendations and they were in different phases. One that the executive could implement immediately, one that the National Assembly has got to look into. Tell us about all of those.
No,
what was the thinking?
No, it's broken into three phases. One on policy issues which the government can deal with. The other one geared towards amendments of existing laws. But what is what is of interest to some of us, and that's why we went to the conference, are the major constitutional reforms. For example, democracy and federalism is built on a tripod stand of equity, fairness, and justice. I think arising from that, we now have a situation where we're going to have parity of states per zones. And why is that important? Because that deals with the present system where a zone has veto power over the rest of the 5 zones of Nigeria, as in the present system. So by this new measure, that will be checkmated so that every zone has equal say. At the moment, if the Northwest doesn't want something, it doesn't go.
So what if they don't want this bill to be passed?
Pardon?
What if they don't want this bill that you talk about?
That is the mistake. So if we play into the hands of the structure which was set up to prevent Nigerians emancipating themselves, then it will be unacceptable.
How does playing into the hands come in here? Because, I mean, is that not the process? You say you want that bill, it goes to the National Assembly. So what if it doesn't pass?
If it doesn't pass, I think the president is left no choice to work with the people and exercise the sovereignty of the people. And nobody, National Assembly can't stand by the people. The president himself can't stand if the people say this is what we want. You see, a referendum that's why it's called direct democracy, when you exercise it. When it comes to major issues in any country, they go to the people. You see, the days of someone thinking he knows it better or knows it better is past. Once you don't deal with these issues, you have situations that will later show their heads either in form of insurgency, militant, or other things. So why don't we now solve the problem by obeying and respecting that anybody governing is governing, is governing because the people say should govern.
Mm. You know, you keep saying, you keep making reference to the people, yes. The people, the people. And I keep wondering if the people whom you're referring to, the everyday Nigerian, was really aware of what was going on in Abuja in terms of what was happening at that conference and the far-reaching decisions that were taken in such a way that that person will feel agitated enough to say, this is what we want at the end of the day. It would seem that it's only the elite that are bothered about it.
Mokwe, you are right, because the issue with what was discussed revolve around things which are intangibles. They are not like someone talking about building a road or someone talking about building a church. Mm-hmm. So because there are things that are not tangible, mm-hmm. You are right that the masses mm-hmm. were not carried along. But I can assure you that some of the manifestations of those ideas, mm-hmm. like if you tell a man in Borno State today, where the insurgency is affecting, I would call the southern part of Borno more than anywhere else, and the people, through their delegate and elder statesmen like Paul Bassi, came up and said, look, give us a state, Savannah State. To them, it matters that they need Savannah State. So what I'm saying is that people will eventually, once the report comes out, will now see that they have things at stake. If you tell an Ijebu man that whether he doesn't need Ijebu State, he will tell you to go and tell that to someone else. He needs Ijebu State. Because if Gombe can be a state, it doesn't see why Ijebu cannot be a state. So this opportunity you are giving us is part of sensitizing the people that it is their duty to rise up and not allow anybody to tell them how they be governed.
You know, in that deliberations, you had several, we understand there were far much more than 18 demands for state creation.
19.
There were 19.
Not demands, that is resolutions that 19 states will be.
No, because even before now, with the National Assembly, they had several requests for creation of states.
Yes.
And now the National Conference, you had 19
resolutions,
the ones that were agreed.
Yes.
But one wonders, will there ever be an end to these demands for creation of states? Does this solve the problem?
That indeed underscores the point that there's some injustices, there's some imbalance somewhere. The only way to solve this is to correct what was done by my former colleagues in the military, who deliberately created states as in other words, the states they created were only to serve their own interests rather than serving the whole people. I think what we've got now is that if we achieve this parity of 9 states per zone, I think it will go in a long way to satisfy the yearnings of the people. The idea people talk of, are these states going to be viable or not? Mm-hmm. One of the requirements we had that they must be over 1 million. Any state must be over 1 million people. Secondly, people forget that political aspirations at times are much more pressing on a person than economic viability. And who is there to say that viability based on rent and royalties from non-renewable resources is viability? I would have thought the greatest viability is the human resource. All we need to do is to change the mindset whereby we go and share money got from rents, from oil, and allow people work and keep what they earn and pay the due taxes.
So, a lot of people agree with you on that. I mean, in terms of saying that it's not viable, you know, that we will continue to get money from rent and, you know, royalties, as it were. And so that's one of the reasons why they say that it is easy for people to clamor for states, because that is a system that we're still operating now. At the moment when we begin to make people pay, they would realize that it is actually more efficient to have one government. I mean, to come together a lot more. You find people coalescing a lot more because they will find out that it's a lot easier on them economically to run government that way. Are we getting that idea across?
Thanks. What we did was we tried to address the aspirations of ethno-nationalities or people who have been dominated even before the British came to Nigeria. Now, that is freeing them from, like Professor Dara did say, a situation whereby, if I'm to use an example, in my state, Cross River, if the Obong of Calabar were to determine who would be the king in my own part of Northern Cross River, that is unacceptable. That still happens in this country. So we allow for peoples to have self-determination within the federation. Mm-hmm. Having allowed, we allowed for some clauses and provisions, which is people can come into a union by choice. In other words, whilst we could not get regions in, of course, we couldn't get regions because Lagos State, for example, officially said they don't want regions. Like the former Attorney General of Lagos State said here on your program, that Lagos has been one of the 3 that made up Nigeria.
Now, do you agree with him?
I agree with him to the point that Lagos, what Lagos should have sought was to be a region, not to say that Lagos State came out with an official paper, Lagos State, and I think I was so embarrassed that a state run by Fashola can come out and say they don't want regions. What they should have been saying is that we want Lagos to be a region, but allow other people to have regions.
I mean, if you say